Good evening, everybody.
Evening, Mel.
Evening, Mel.
And we seem to get quite a lot of echo here
Evening already.
from somebody. Sorted. Excellent.
Evening already. Okay.
Welcome to this interim full council meeting. Do we have any apologies for absent?
Yes, we do. Councillor Collins, Councillor Gately, Councillor Harwood, Councillor Try, Councillor Wright, and Councillor Willis.
Thank you. And are there any declarations of personal or prejudicial interest that aren't already on your declarations of interest anyway? Okay, thank you very much. And the next agenda point, yes, thank you. Nearly. We have a presentation from Hallam Land Management about land south of Brackley Road and land south of the A421 stroke west of Gawcott Road. So, please.
Well, thanks so much for inviting us in to talk to you today. I'm going to start with a brief introduction. Someone got 10 minutes to look what was there.
Yeah.
Okay, so my name's Ben Mennell, Associate Director at Hallam Land.
Hi, I'm Claire Britton. I'm Senior Associate Planner at David Lock Associates, so the planning consultant as well.
And I'm Andy Birch, also from Hallam Land.
We do have a presentation, but it does say host disabled sharing. Oh, sorry. Thank you.
I think I'm going to be most of the talking to. Shall I stand up? Would it help people, or are you okay down this end? It's just
Probably easier if you do stand up, if that's okay with you.
yeah.
Could we ask if they could there's a lot of noise from the air conditioning behind.
Yes, yeah. Sure. Can you try again?
Hi.
So just have a request for everybody to speak up, because on this side of the room there is quite a lot of noise from the air conditioning.
Okay.
But I'm sure you'll manage.
I think as we're waiting for this to come on, I'll set it. Here we are. I'll set a bit of the context, and so we've had the benefit of quite seeing the minute of quite a few of the meetings. There's been quite a few of the developers coming in over recent weeks and months. Ideally, what we'd be keen on is having workshops and various things, looking towards the next neighbourhood plan, because that is something that we did before. For those of you who weren't involved in the neighbourhood plan, so Hallam Land, we promoted the St Rumbold's field site. We're involved at a very early stage in the neighbourhood plan, so from 2013 or 2014. And as you know, that neighbourhood plan was taken forward in the sort of policy vacuum. There wasn't a local plan, there had been a couple of failed local plans, and so the town council decided to take on the mantle of allocating sites, and through that, St Rumbold's fields were subsequently allocated. And then we got plan permission, and it now, as you all know, is very well built out. So why are we here now? We're here now because we didn't really want to be forgotten for the next site. We thought we'll sort of wait until the opportunity is there. The Buckinghamshire local plan has taken much longer than people expect. And so today was just to say, look, the site we're sort of promoting now, we're here, we've got some thoughts about it, but we're also not coming in saying, look, we've thought about everything and here's the scheme, this is what you think. Maybe it's not an opportunity to get feedback from you today. It's probably not. We've only got 10 minutes, but the opportunities are there. We've done work in the background. When the time is right to engage, that's what we're here to do. But all we wanted to do was set a bit of the context, just talk about the site so you're aware of it, talk about some of the things we're thinking about. And of course, if there is any feedback, great. If not, it'll be for another time. The site we're talking about is to the southwest of the town. So St Rumbold Fields is in here. We've got the Gawcott Road, where the weight scheme, I'm sure you'll know that, is in that section. And so the site here is owned by two parties. The top part being owned by New College, who also owned St Rumbold's Fields. And so that's been our involvement there. The St Rumbold's Field site also, as part of that, that's helped to, I use the word facilitate loosely, but the cemetery and allotments, which is allocated in there, and that's something I'm happy to talk about that later if people are interested. It's not quite what I'm involved in, but I know the background. The New College are engaged with the town council to deliver that section, which came through the neighbourhood plan. If we just sort of go through the sides, I'll say fairly quickly, because it is a bit of an introduction and we can ask questions later. To some of the context, this is the SLAR, so the housing land and availability assessment from a few years ago, which looked at all the sites around the town and scored them. The context here, the only site that's, so Lace Hill is that green one. The Rainier site, the employment site, which you'll know well about, that's that one, and then the weight scheme there. So the area we're talking about is here. So one was scored green, the other was scored red, which we'll come back to later.
And it just very quickly, just while it's on the screen, just to point out to you, sorry Claire, if you could just nip back. Anyway, there's two landowners here. So the green at the time when we put our submission, this was New College, that we act on their behalf, and then we've got a family trust, so we now act on behalf of family trust as well.
Just a bit of context, really, just context plan. Again, you'll be probably familiar with a lot, but this is also part of the thought process that we're going through. There's existing permissions around the town, and some of which are delivering certain type of infrastructure. So this is all going into our assessment of what infrastructure is committed, what's being delivered. And partly that goes through, think about the Buckingham transport plan, which that was part of the evidence base for the last local plan as well. But it was a range of schemes. It talked about a range of things, and some of those have come forward, some haven't. And so as part of our thinking for going forward from here, we need to know what is committed and what will actually be delivered. So then we can say future development comes along, what is that going to be needed? General context, because we know things we've got to look at, we know the weaknesses of the site. You know, it is the other side of the bypass. And so whilst there's been Lace Hill and the weight scheme, which is the other side as well, a key thing that's going to be a weakness for this site is connectivity. So that's something we know we're going to have to work hard on, and that's connectivity into the town rather than coming out to the countryside. So this is just some of the context to build up to something. We knew we'd have to come here today and show something, and so that just leads on to the next slide. I think it's the next slide. Just looking a bit about, as I say, the headline context. Ben, if you just want to pick up some of the thoughts on that.
Yeah, so broadly this is the outline of our very high level master plan at the moment, and what this is showing is a combination of the two land ownerships together, up to 800 homes is what we're proposing. Within that mix, you know, there's a need for primary education within the town, so we'll be proposing a primary school within that mix as well, which currently we're showing in this location. And in addition, obviously got the cemetery allotments in this corner of the site, and off the entrance a provision for some employment, so whether that is local centre, whether that is different type of employment, whether there's provision for health within that part of the local centre is something that we want to talk to you about in the future. And within the mix, we will be up to 40% green infrastructure across the site, and 10% biodiversity net gain, which is standard across the board nowadays. And also in terms of, I suppose, moving forward to where everything's going with carbon in the future home standard, what we're looking at, vision for EVs on roofs and stuff like air source heat technology, which are the national house services are now. So that's probably a broad overview of where we're sat. This is our kind of our first headline view of it, and kind of further engagement well in the future on this.
So we've got a couple of minutes more, is that right?
Yes.
Let's get what the slides we've got, but just slightly more on the context, I suppose. So looking at connectivity, and I think as well as that, things we're looking at, just coming back to the school, and the reason we bought in the land that's scored red in there, it was scored red because it said it didn't have a frontage this way, something we do, and looking at it comprehensively, we know 800 is a high figure. But also we know that if you're going to have a strategic scheme, we don't know what numbers are going to be sort of put out there from a Buckinghamshire wide level, let alone Buckingham level. But that does enable the ability to deliver infrastructure such as a school. And so rather than sort of shrink the scheme to be able to deliver more, but other than that, it's a fairly blank canvas. We're there to look at what are the key issues. We know health is a key issue in town. You know, we know flooding is in the wider town. This site doesn't suffer from that. but we can't do anything about the flooding. So we know there's key issues, but what are the ones we can take away and say, well, what can we take from the previous neighbourhood plan? What can we take from the emerging neighbourhood plan to work into the scheme? And the final thing just to mention, I suppose, is affordable housing. I'm not sure if you mentioned that, but as part of Summer and Boltfield, that was, I think, probably one of the first schemes that committed to doing the 35%, which is in the Buckingham neighbourhood plan and not the local plan. And as I say, that is absolutely our objective. We want a policy compliant scheme. And so that's what we're aiming for this. I know there may be more emerging policy that we have to face going forward, but that's what we're aiming for now.
So one final thing, just one got slide on front of us at the moment, is in terms of connectivity to time, in terms of decimal and cycle. At the early stages at the moment, we're talking about potentially two crossing about up here. We know that as part of the weight scheme, they're doing some improvement works on this side. On the western side, we look for a similar arrangement. That's further roundabout, and we know there's a public right of way that comes through this land into the Buckingham land. So some type of provision on there, but all subject to talking to county highways and further discussion.
I think that probably sums it up. I mean, I think we have we don't know. I mean, as I say, that is visualizations don't mean anything, but gives a bit of context in terms of where it sits within the town. And it's something, as I say, we look to sort of work up, because ultimately this is going to need to form part of consultation with town council, the public, and these sort of help go down line. So I'll end there. I think that's all I want to time.
That was 10 minutes exactly. Well timed. So we have comments or questions from Councillor Cole first.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the presentation. Happy to say we have had a good relationship with Alan over the years. Very hot afternoons down at Aylesbury, probably Nick.
Yes.
I think giving us a tremendous amount of help. This site, going back to the original BART proposals, is roughly site for PUC 025. It's a lot bigger, I understand that. It's also a lot bigger, because that was originally for 360 houses. You're talking about potentially up to 800. You'll be aware at the moment, Buckingham has no unmet housing need. We've met everything now. The 550 extra houses that BART requires of us until 2023 are now fulfilled. That was done with the two sites at Osier Way, which is being built at the moment, as you know, and Morton Road, 130 houses, which are at the moment subject of possibly being called in by the Secretary of State, possibly not. The big problem is 2,000 people that's going to bring to Buckingham. We don't have the infrastructure. You do talk about a primary school. We need a secondary school, not just primary schools. A completely new secondary school. Ones we have are overloaded already. There's no sixth form any longer. But Winslow, they dropped theirs, so sixth formers in the state education system are looking for places to go. We need a lot of health provisions. You know, we have a new medical centre which is going to probably appear in 2-3 years' time, subject to funding, but we're completely overloaded at the moment. Doctors, dentists can't cope with any more patients. At the moment, there's a 6-month waiting list to see a dentist. I mean, it's extraordinary in this day and age. So, I mean, but as well as chairman of planning, I'm chairing together with Gina the neighbourhood plan working group. So, you know, we're going to be actively talking to all people like yourselves and other developers, you know, about how we can move forward. So it's a very timely presentation. Thank you. But I'm grateful if you take those points on board. Thank you.
Do we respond to any of that, or is that just? I'm happy to, or do you think we're not allowed that?
Yeah, please give a quick response. Yes.
Yeah, actually agreed in terms of, you know, we are looking about what numbers are being, we're looking at, you know, we know that further numbers will be required, you know, where for Buckingham. And so planning for it early on does enable you to think about infrastructure. Actually, no secondary school is an issue. That isn't something that we can work with and deliver by ourselves. We need engagement with the county council, well, not county council, not that long earlier, but with all parties. And it's the same with highways. And at this point in time, it's very difficult to get that engagement. We're not in a local plan process. We're going for it. I don't think anyone here, I know there's a 421 study being done for the highway network, but it's not in front of us. We know that there's updates to the transport model to come, but it's not in front of us. So we can only try and bring forward the things that we know, but we know there's a lot more around the corner.
Councillor O'Donoghue.
Thank you.
Question.
I was going to say about secondary schools as well, is an issue. So if you can take that on board and try and plan that in, it is needed here, definitely.
Yes, as I say, as soon as we can get in to have a conversation with the education team, that will help. But we probably won't get invited in for a while. It's really strategic in nature, so we will try our best.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Yes, Councillor Davies.
I just wonder, thank you. Just wonder whether this site is actually in Buckingham or whether it's in Gawcott.
Maybe one of
I know where the
It's falls within the Buckingham plan area. Which, and I think that's.
I think we do have a plan. We can share it.
Because the Asia Way development
It's half and half, yeah.
partly in Gawcott, isn't it? So
Yeah.
Now, this would appear to be fully within our parish.
Yes, that's what we should think.
thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Val?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to know a touch on timescales that you're contemplating.
Okay. The timescale we were working to was almost going to be a follow-on from the Buckinghamshire local plan, which is due to be adopted in 2025. But I mean, it's been 3 years of nothing really. And ultimately, we know the process here that there's a local plan, which the neighbourhood plan has to strategically think about. What happened 8 years ago was it happened the other way around, which is unusual. And so we will need to feed into Buckinghamshire local plan and the neighbourhood plan. And it's probably for you guys more than us to know how they do to go alongside each other. Because if it is a process where Buckinghamshire Council say, well, Buckingham, we looked across the whole thing and these are the numbers we require, and Buckingham has to allocate X number, then our Buckinghamshire Council then get to allocate this site, or are they not? Because this is one of those unusual areas where we see both. We've seen a neighbourhood plan allocate numbers, and then the VAL came and allocated on top of that. So the timescales are local plan timescales from our point of view, but my guess is as good as yours about how that will all play out.
I think just to have a very briefly, I think it's about presentation in terms of we're engaging both processes. It's not just going to be a local plan, so we can obviously so we track both those in terms of engagement.
Few questions, not on the application, but asking about the applications. Are you in contact with Buckinghamshire Council on this, or have you come here before you've gone to them? Secondly, are you in contact with CCG?
In terms of engagement on highways, and we have to have some conversations in terms of site. You know, the Buckinghamshire Council, we've not met specifically on this site, but we've been managed through the sites and the latest one. Those.
Have you had any contact with CCG?
We haven't.
And yes, or what's your name?
But yeah, on the CCG point, I think some people know we were involved in Mayfield as well. And so the scheme that was there, as you know, is extremely difficult to deliver health facilities. And that was sort of taken out of our hands in a way, but over in dealing with Buckinghamshire CCG and Oxfordshire CCG, we had town council support, we had plenty of letters of support, but we couldn't get them on board. And so that was an amalgamation of some extra facilities, and we couldn't make it work. So we are not here to be able to say we can deliver health facilities. We can facilitate it, we can give land and money, but actually delivering them is very difficult. So if anyone has any ideas, we can do, we can sit in the process, but we can't lead it, I'm afraid. We've not managed.
Councillor O'Donoghue.
Thank you. Section 106, we're currently not invited to sit around the table when those discussions are taking place with the Shire Council. Would you be willing to hear our views on what we feel is important here and take those forward?
Yes, I think that's what happened a little bit on St Runbold's Fields. I can't remember exactly the sort of list that came out of that in the end, because, you know, ultimately the deciding body will say, well, what's still road compliant and what's not. But if there is some context, you are able to direct resources a little easier than you were at some point to where it's needed. The one element of, at the moment, there's a strategic transport pot where, you know, money will go into a pot, and where that gets spent, I don't know what happens with that. I don't know if the town council are engaged in that process or not. But I'm absolutely happy to make a commitment that, you know, we're here to elicit those. If we don't put money into something, we want to see it going the local we should do.
Thank you.
Councillor Hetherington.
Thank you. Well, I am a resident of St Runbold's Fields. It's very nice. I'm very happy. It's very, very nice. But really and truly, it's nothing much more than a dormitory. It would be very nice to think that a new development was more than just a dormitory.
Well, thank you for the comment, and we driven around it quite a few times, and definitely something that having a sort of sense and a local feature, it does miss out from. Designing in the sort of next possible scheme, then if there's going to be a school, what I don't quite know is, for instance, a Lace Hill, does the school act as a community feature? Is it a place where you can go in and out of hours? That's the thing that I've just not sort of picked up on, but going forward, having a school sometimes works in communities. I see from some heads now that that may not be the case at Lace Hill. And so is there another way of being able to deliver that? You know, a community hall is one thing, but it's about creating that sense of place. So that's definitely high up on our agenda to try and revisit.
We also welcome any views as we engage in the process further down the line in terms of good experiences, bad experiences, how it's worked out.
Yes, thanks.
Any more questions or comments? That doesn't appear to be the case, so thank you very much for your presentation. That was welcome to have an early view of your ideas and thoughts.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We move on to point 4 on the agenda, which is the Rural Market Towns Group representative. This was a role taken, carried out by Councillor White in the last year, and he has indicated he no longer wishes to do this. I don't know a huge amount about it, but it's a group of small towns or rural market towns like Buckingham. They exchange ideas, and it can probably be quite useful for us to be familiar with what they are doing. So I think the idea is to, well, ideally find, and if necessary, appoint a volunteer, I suppose, find a volunteer who would maybe like to do this and find they might have the time to do it. I don't think it's a particularly frequent thing. It meets maybe twice a year or something like that. 3 times a year?
I think it's 3 or 4 times a year.
3 or 4 times a year.
Online.
It's online, meets 3 or 4 times a year, and don't all shout here at once.
Can we nominate people?
That's not what we're doing.
Is that because they're not here?
Sorry?
What basis is they're not here?
I nominate Ryan.
He's not here. Okay, let's nominate somebody outside. No,
I don't even know, do it now.
not now. We'll do it outside the meeting. We'll have a chat, and then we'll find somebody. But we are happy as a meeting to decide that somebody should represent us on that body.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, somehow this nominating somebody in the meeting doesn't tend to work. Surprise, surprise. Agenda point number 5, PSPO complaint to receive a report from the Deputy Town Clerk.
From me, actually.
Okay, so from the Town Clerk, indeed.
This is a very complicated matter, and I'll try and condense it down as quickly as possible.
So, faces protection order, basically, a means of trying to prevent antisocial behaviour. And there has been one in Buckingham quite some time. Basically, it used to say that the exact wording was within the restricted area, which is an area of the town centre and some of the surrounding housing estates. Any person who fails to comply with an authorised officer or police constable's request not to consume or to surrender alcohol in their possession commits an offence. So that's saying, you can drink in the town centre, you can sit at a jam, you can have a glass of wine in the park, and that's fine. But if a police officer or another suitably authorised officer asks you to stop drinking or asks you to hand over your alcohol, you'd be committing an offence if you don't comply. That was what was consulted on back in 2020. And that was what we were expecting to be renewed. Been happening in the town for some time. What we found went up was the signage, and there is a picture on the first page there, which says consuming alcohol in this area is prohibited except in licensed premises. Failure to comply with this order can lead to the prosecution of a fine of up to 500 notice of £100, which is obviously a very different wording to what had been up previously and has an impact on our events and people about business. We have had conversations that said things like we can cover up the signage, and I wouldn't be particularly happy with the fact that that means that that order's not in place. In the town. So we have, well, I wrote to the council officer to try and find out how this happened, and I have attached a response that I got in full. I should also add that the previous town clerk was engaged in the renewal process and wrote quite a long letter explaining the town council's view to the review committee. And we were quite surprised to find that that letter had not been referenced before. Our views were that it was reported to Buckinghamshire councillors that we supported the review when Paul Hodson's wording was pretty clear that we were not supporting the review. So the town clerk wrote something along the lines of the council strongly requests the PSPO is amended to use the original wording. Town council's strong view is that this earlier wording should be used for the new PSPO. The no alcohol signs should fit with the desired field for the town centre, and in any case, the town council opposes the outright ban. And as I say, that was reported back to the committee as Buckingham Town Council and Thames Valley Police both are supportive of the PSPO being extended. So our recommendation in this matter is that the town council makes a formal complaint to Buckinghamshire Council to investigate further how this happened. And the response that says that they can only consult on the original wording. The question is, well, how did that original wording magically change without any consultation or anybody being even advised it was going to happen? Literally the first thing you're about to just signage. That's a very long story condensed down. Does anybody have any questions for me?
Thank you, because we've thought on it. When this item was first noticed, it was Councillor Frank Davis who actually noted that the actual sign was worded incorrectly, brought it to the council's attention. We discussed it, as it says in the report, in the events committee, and we corresponded and we asked the then town clerk, as said. The understanding that we had is that we wanted to stay with the status quo on the licence. It's less than satisfactory that the legal officer of Buckingham Town Council present at the time, a submission to a statutory committee with legal bounds was overseen, and the reference to the statements were changed, and the report said that we were in agreement. No way does that in any way relate to the facts. Further to that, I personally corresponded with the cabinet member, and the response was the same as what the town clerk refers to. We can cover the notice up. It's not a satisfactory position it's not a legal position, not a right position, and it isn't the correct position. What people may not realise is that areas of Linden Village, areas of Badgers, and I think I'm correct there, would not be able to stand outside their house, glass of wine, and they could be arrested and charged £500. But in Page Hill, you'll be able to drink all day because you're not included in the order. For some reason, Page Hill residents can drink as much as they want outside their house without fear of hindrance. So that really is a nonsense. So if we don't agree the recommendation, which I'm happy to propose we do agree, we'll be letting down years of work on this. The first time the order came out, only person left who remember, probably Councillor Ordew, it was, I think then, Councillor Rob Lehman at the time, who raised the fact that they were going to introduce an order, and we worked very hardly in those days to actually get the wording that we did, which meant that everyone in Buckingham was civilised on the basis that we didn't really want the same order that they had in Aylesbury, because you can tell evidence says you had music in the market and whatever events we did, people in Buckingham were generally very well behaved and very purposeful. So in short, I'm happy to support the recommendation and not do so, but people in this town at danger of being criminalised.
Next, Councillor O'Donoghue.
Thank you. I'm happy to go with the recommendation and will second the proposal that we have the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Osabogo.
I'm just thinking from there, I just wanted to highlight the exaggeration of Scotchbury about not being able to drink out of your house. I'm not sure that's what it means. But I would also be supporting. I would also be supporting the nation, considering it is the representation from town council was always reflected. So if to the extent that the town council had made formal position, taken a formal position, and that's not what was reflected in the report, I think it's something we should complain about and find out where that is. Now, I've also noticed that police supported this, and I wonder how that would impact on decision making. But for the grounds that we took a position and that was inaccurate, we should do that complaint.
Thank you. Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I also support the recommendations from the town clerk. Members like to bear in mind that we've had the same problem over Buckingham terminal hours. The number of hours premises can be licensed and open. And again, the Unitary Council unilaterally, sorry about the pun, decided that they're just doing away with our terminal hours, not just ours, but there is in Aylesbury and other places with no consultation with this council. I don't think this is malicious from reading everything. I think it's just someone didn't do their job down in Aylesbury. It was nodded through, but it is absolutely incorrect, this, and yes, we must strongly oppose this.
So reading the room now, I believe we could probably go to the vote on this one. Yeah.
Just one point. I'd like the town clerk to read back what the areas it applies to, because I was reading the report, what it was the areas it applies to, and what I said was factually correct. It does divide the town up in those areas, and I was being comical about the fact that the good people of Page Hill can drink and I can't be Badgers, and I felt quite offended about that. But I do think we need to know that, and I do think the procedure in this, in the sense that the police would not have seen, even though they would not have seen our submission either when they made their decision, I believe. And so they were making it on the basis that we were in agreement. So they were not. So it's really quite serious, and somebody made a mistake. And it is a public record, because I put a written question in, and it's public record in Buckinghamshire Council minutes.
In answer to the first part, I can't remember the entire scope of the map. It might be easier if I send the map around, but it definitely does include the housing estates, councils that have been mentioned, large space. I can't quite understand how that boundary was decided upon, and there's no information as to why certain bits of the town. But a street wanted to have a street party, for instance, and have a drink outside the house within that area, then they would be committing that offence.
Councillor Davies.
Thank you. I just wanted to note that 2.5 on this, it says in October 2023, Buckinghamshire Council decided to renew the order.
It's
I
like
think
October 22.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for pointing that out.
In which case we're in time.
Time travel. Are we ready to move on the vote on this one?
Yeah.
So everybody in favour? Looks like it's unanimous.
Well done.
Okay, thank you very much. Then the Swan Trail EMR to receive a report from the finance officer.
This is a very straightforward one. The Swan Trail that I'm sure you're all aware is going to be launched at the weekend. We went out for sponsorship last year. Managed to secure a fair amount of sponsorship, and some of it was paid in the last financial year. Unfortunately, somebody that's called Claire forgot to add it to the earmark reserve and carry it over. So what I'm asking for is, can we create a new earmark reserve, £585, which was the sponsorship money that I could have carried over.
Agree.
Councillor Sturridge.
Just one question, it will be in the event budget, won't it? The earmark reserved against the, is it will be spent in the event, but it will do another one.
It's pretty much, it's been spent, but at the moment it looks like we've overspent, but we haven't overspent. So we don't have the sponsorship.
Okay. Thanks, then. That was quick. So then agenda point number 7, section 106 funding priorities, and we have a report. It says here from the Deputy Town Clerk. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay, over to you then.
So essentially there was a request from Buckinghamshire Council to get involved with the Town Council's suggestion for section 106 funding for site Q, which there is currently an application for as a mix of the Town Council view of the application is entirely separate to any in about how section 106 funding for that site, it does go ahead, should be spent. So that was taken to the BNDP, and working group, and they put the 2 recommendations used here. One is for a youth shelter or meeting space that they want to have on site, and the other is for community centre improvements focused on Ladies Hill, including agreements between site view and place for the centre, on the basis that that was the community centre to that site.
Councillor Sturridge.
This isn't talking about the application, no way, shape or form, it's talking about if there wasn't a planning occasion. Agreed, if it's all theoretical, and as there's no legal agreement, I think the principles in this mirror the discussions which were had around the difficulties of this. And I think we agreed some time back that as a council we'd deal with section 106 is separate to planning applications. We have no control over that, but that would be the Buckinghamshire Council's decision. So I think these are pretty sensible proposals, and there's nowhere else to facilitate any uplift, as was advised to us by the officer in the meeting, which was Louise, which I pointed out that this was the best way of us securing it, because we have to be careful about if we put stuff into section 106, we have the possibility of delivering it. And this does allow us with the possibility to deliver it. We don't need, if by any chance there was an agreement, we lose the money afterwards. And I think that's a wise way forward.
Any other comments or?
Okay, vote.
So,
With the recommendation.
yeah, we vote on the recommendation.
Yeah.
All those in favour? Again, that appears to be unanimous. Okay, we're making good progress here. Excellent. Chair's announcements, that's even quicker because I haven't got any.
Oh, go on.
And then date of the next meeting. Full council, Monday, the 10th of July. Interim council, Monday, the 9th of October. We now have another session where it is ready.
We need to resolve to go into
Yes, so we need to resolve to go into private session for the next item.
Yep.
Are we?
Yes, agreed.
Yeah, in that case, need to invite members of the public to leave us. Yes,